Look at the boy with his sling.
Before Israel's greatest king ever wore a crown, an entire nation was paralyzed by one man. Every sunrise, a giant walked into the valley and challenged Israel to send a warrior. Every sunrise, nobody moved. For 40 days, fear ruled the battlefield. Men who had survived wars could not even lift their shields. Soldiers shook in silence. Some could barely stand before dawn. Others whispered prayers they no longer believed would be answered. Even King Saul, the tallest man in Israel, a king once feared by enemies, hid inside his tent while the voice of Goliath echoed across the hills. And then a shepherd arrived. No armor, no sword, no military training. Just a sling, 5 stones, and a faith stronger than the terror-crushing 40,000 soldiers. But here is the part most people never notice. Before David ever faced Goliath, he had already fought lions in the wilderness. He had already torn a lamb from the mouth of a bear. Long before the valley saw him as a warrior, God was preparing him in secret fields outside Bethlehem. The Philistine giant stood over 9 feet tall, according to the scriptures, covered in bronze armor, weighing hundreds of pounds. The iron point of his spear alone weighed about 15 pounds. His challenge was simple: send one man to fight him, and the losing nation would become servants to the other. Nobody accepted, because Goliath was doing more than threatening Israel. He was humiliating the God of Israel in front of 2 armies. Morning after morning, his voice rolled through the valley like thunder. Choose your champion. And every morning, silence answered him. Then David heard the giant speak. Something changed instantly. While every soldier stepped backward, one shepherd stepped forward. The Bible says David ran toward the battle line, not walked, ran. A teenager sprinting toward the monster that had broken an entire army. The Philistines saw it. Israel saw it. Even Goliath saw it. And for one brief moment, the giant stepped back. David had seen that reaction before. Predators always moved the same way when death was coming for them. But the Valley of Elah did not become a battlefield overnight. For 40 long days before the stone was ever released, fear had already conquered Israel from the inside. While fear consumed the Valley of Elah, life continued far from the battlefield. On the hills outside Bethlehem, sheep still searched for water. Wind still moved through the grass. And a shepherd named David kept watch beneath the open sky. Nobody looked at him and saw a future king. He was the youngest son of Jesse, the forgotten one, the boy left behind while his brothers marched to war under Saul's banner. They carried swords and shields. David carried scars. The wilderness had trained him differently. Every night in those hills was a lesson in survival. Wolves circled the flock after dark. Lions moved silently through the ravines. Bears came down from the mountains when food grew scarce. And every predator learned the same thing. Those sheep belonged to David. The scriptures later recorded his own words. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. That was not poetry to him. It was memory. There had been nights when he slept beside wounded lambs to keep them alive until sunrise. Nights when blood soaked through his shepherd's cloak before dawn ever came. The wild taught David patience. Isolation taught him discipline. But danger taught him something greater than both. Run toward what threatens the helpless. His sling became an extension of his hand. Smooth stones from the brook, leather worn thin from endless practice. Trees across Bethlehem's hills carried scars from thousands of strikes. His aim became so precise that even fast-moving threats could not reach the flock. David did not miss often. Then came the ordinary assignment that would change history. Jesse placed bread, grain, and cheese into David's hands and told him to bring supplies to his brothers at the battle line. A simple task: deliver food, return home, But heaven was already moving beneath that moment. As David approached the camp, he heard Israel before he saw it. The grinding of armor, nervous voices, horses kicking against restraints. Fear hung over the valley, heavier than smoke. Then everything went silent. Not peaceful silence, that spreads when thousands of men are waiting for death to speak again. And then Goliath appeared. The giant stepped into the valley, wrapped in bronze that flashed beneath the sun like burning metal. His spear looked massive enough to pierce multiple men in a single strike. Every movement carried confidence built from years of war and victory. Again his voice thundered across the battlefield. Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. Nobody moved. David stared in disbelief as trained soldiers backed away from a single man. Warriors who once fought, lions now lowered their eyes to the ground. Some would not even look toward the valley. His older brother Eliab immediately tried to drive him away. What doest thou here? But David barely heard him. Something inside him had already changed, because David was not seeing only a giant. He was seeing a predator threatening what belonged to God. And the same fire that once drove him against lions and bears now began rising inside him again, stronger than before. By the time the giant finished speaking, David already knew something the entire army did not. Goliath could fall. Inside Saul's command tent, the atmosphere felt heavier than the battlefield itself. Oil lamps flickered against damp canvas walls. Sweat, dust, spilled wine, and fear mixed into the air until it became difficult to breathe. For 40 days, the king of Israel had listened to Goliath mock his army, mock his nation, and mock the living God. And every day, the giant walked away unanswered. Saul sat frozen beneath the weight of humiliation. Once he had led men into battle, once songs were sung about his victories, but now even the strongest warriors in Israel waited for someone else to stand first. Then the guards brought in a shepherd. David entered the tent carrying no armor, no rank, no military title. Dirt still clung to his sandals from the hills of Bethlehem. Several soldiers laughed quietly when they saw him. Others stared with disbelief. This child wanted to face Goliath? Saul looked at him and immediately saw the impossible. Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David never stepped back. The fear controlling the camp seemed unable to reach him. Instead of boasting, he spoke with the calm certainty of someone remembering old battles. Thy servant kept his father's sheep. The tent slowly fell silent. David described nights alone in the wilderness when predators came for the flock. A lion carrying off a lamb into the darkness, a bear breaking through the herd, while the sheep scattered in terror. And every time, David ran toward the danger instead of away from it. I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. The words stunned the men around him. This was not reckless pride. His arms carried scars that proved every story. Deep claw marks, old bites, flesh that had healed badly after battles nobody ever witnessed. While soldiers trained with swords inside safe camps, David had learned survival against creatures stronger than himself. Then his voice hardened even further. The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Something shifted inside the tent. Not confidence yet, but uncertainty. For the first time in weeks, Saul looked at someone who was not afraid. The king ordered his own armor to be brought forward. Bronze plates polished for war. A massive helmet. A sword built for a king. Servants fastened the armor onto David piece by piece until the shepherd nearly disappeared beneath its weight. He tried to walk. The armor dragged him down immediately. The helmet blocked his sight. The heavy bronze restricted his breathing. Every movement became slower, weaker, unnatural. David stopped after only a few steps and removed the armor. "I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them." The statement carried more weight than anyone realized. Israel trusted bronze, but David trusted God, and that difference was about to decide the valley. If this moment reminds you that faith can stand where fear collapses, type David in the comments below, because this valley was about to witness something impossible. He reached instead for the tools he already knew. His shepherd's staff, his sling, 5 smooth stones gathered from the brook below the valley. To the soldiers watching inside the tent, it looked absurd. A shepherd walking toward a giant with nothing but stones. But David was no longer thinking like the rest of Israel. Everyone else saw an unbeatable warrior. David saw a target. The valley held its breath as David stepped out from the camp of Israel. No armor covered his chest, no sword hung at his side, only a staff in one hand and a sling hanging at his waist. And then something happened that nobody expected. David started running, not walking carefully toward danger, not slowing as the giant approached, running straight toward Goliath, while thousands of soldiers stood frozen behind him. The contrast stunned both armies. 40,000 trained warriors had spent 40 days retreating from one man. Yet a shepherd from Bethlehem moved forward without hesitation, as if fear itself had lost all power over him. Across the valley, Goliath towered above the battlefield like a moving fortress. Bronze armor covered his body from head to foot. The shaft of his spear looked like the beam of a great structure, and the iron point gleamed beneath the sun. Even his shield-bearer walked ahead of him, carrying protection large enough to hide a man completely. And still David kept coming. The Philistine giant stared at the boy approaching, with nothing but leather, stones, and certainty. Then he laughed. "Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves?" His voice rolled through the valley as soldiers on both sides watched in silence. The giant expected fear. Everyone before had shown it, but David answered with words that struck harder than bronze. "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied." The battlefield changed in that moment, not because of weapons, because for the first time in 40 days, someone stood before Goliath without trembling. Then the impossible happened. The giant took a step backward, just one step, small enough that some almost missed it. But the armies saw it clearly. The mighty warrior who had terrified nations shifted his weight away from a T-shaped shepherd, carrying stones from a brook. A ripple moved through the Philistine ranks. Even Israel stared in disbelief. David recognized the movement immediately. Out in the wilderness, predators often reacted the same way before defeat. Wolves did it. Lions did it. There was always a brief moment when instinct sensed danger before pride accepted it. And now Goliath's body understood something. His arrogance refused to admit. This battle was no longer under his control. David closed the distance even faster. Wind pushed against his shepherd's cloak as he ran downhill into the valley. Dust rose beneath his feet. The giant lifted his spear and roared again, trying to crush the moment with intimidation. But it was too late. Fear had ruled the battlefield for 40 days. Now, something stronger had entered the valley. David's hand moved toward the sling with the calm precision of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Everything around him seemed to disappear. The shouting, the armor, the armies watching from both hills. Only 2 figures remained in the valley now, the giant and the shepherd. Goliath advanced with crushing confidence, bronze plates clashing against each other as he moved. His spear, rose high above the battlefield, heavy enough to split shields and bodies alike. Every step looked unstoppable, but David never slowed down. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a smooth stone from the brook below the valley. Small, ordinary, easy to overlook, yet history was about to turn on that single stone. The sling began to spin, faster, faster. The leather cut through the air with a sharp rising whistle that echoed across the valley. David's eyes never left the target ahead of him, not the giant's armor, not the massive shield, not the spear, only the narrow opening between helmet and forehead. The one place left unprotected. Goliath raised his weapon and moved forward to crush the shepherd before he could strike. But the giant carried too much weight, too much armor. Every movement came a fraction too late. David planted his foot, his shoulder turned, the sling snapped forward, and the stone was released. The scriptures describe the moment with terrifying simplicity, and the stone sunk into his forehead. For one heartbeat, the entire battlefield froze. The stone crossed the valley faster than the eye could follow and struck the giant directly in the head with overwhelming force. Goliath's body jerked violently. His expression collapsed from rage into shock. Then silence fell. The warrior who had mocked Israel for 40 days stood motionless for a brief instant, swaying beneath the weight of his armor as if the earth itself had shifted beneath him. And then the giant fell forward, not backward, forward, face first into the ground before the armies of Israel and Philistia. The impact thundered across the valley. Dust exploded upward around his body. Bronze armor crashed against stone. The man who had terrified an entire nation now lay motionless at the feet of a shepherd carrying no sword. Shock spread through both armies. The Philistines stared in disbelief. Israel could barely breathe. Moments earlier, Goliath had looked invincible. Now the impossible had happened before their eyes. But the most unsettling part is this. Goliath was not the last giant connected to biblical history. What happened next would become even darker. In that instant, the balance of the battlefield changed forever. For a moment, Goliath's body still moved. One hand clawed weakly at the dirt beneath him as the valley stood frozen in shock. The giant who had dominated Israel for 40 days now lay collapsed in silence before a shepherd from Bethlehem. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then David ran again, not away from danger, toward it. He rushed straight to the fallen warrior without hesitation. There's no celebration in his face, no relief. A shepherd understood something. Soldiers often forgot. When danger falls, the battle is not finished until the threat is ended. Goliath's massive sword lay beside him, half buried in the earth. The weapon was enormous, built for hands far larger than David's. He grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled with everything he had. The blade rose slowly into the sunlight. For one brief instant, the valley watched a shepherd standing over a giant with the enemy's own sword raised above him. Then David ended the battle with the giant's own sword. The scriptures record it plainly. David took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him and cut off his head therewith.
Come here.
The impossible was complete. The champion of Philistia was dead. Shock ripped through the Philistine ranks first. Confidence vanished instantly. The army that had marched behind Goliath's strength suddenly realized the giant who protected them would never stand again. Panic spread across the battlefield. Lines broke apart. Soldiers dropped shields and fled toward the roads leading back to Philistine territory. The sound of retreat thundered through the valley as fear reversed direction. Now Israel moved forward. 40 days of humiliation exploded into sudden courage. Men who had hidden behind rocks and tents surged downhill with courage returning to their hearts. The same army that had once trembled before Goliath now pursued the Philistines across the countryside. The battle turned into a collapse. Meanwhile, David remained standing near the body of the giant, holding proof that the impossible had happened. The shepherd who arrived carrying bread for his brothers had become the warrior every man in Israel would remember. Saul himself could hardly understand what he was witnessing. Whose son is this youth? And the answer came back, the son of thy servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. But the valley of Elah had already changed David forever. He entered that battlefield as an unknown shepherd. He left it as the man who defeated the giant no one else dared face. Soon songs began spreading through Israel. Women gathered in celebration as the armies returned from victory, and one line would echo across the nation. Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. From that day forward, David would no longer live in obscurity among sheep and hills. Kings would hear his name, enemies would fear it, and Israel would never forget the moment a shepherd walked into the valley and a giant fell. But the story of giants did not begin with Goliath. Long before the valley of Elah, long before David ever picked up a stone, the earth had already witnessed something far more terrifying. The Bible describes a time before the flood, when the world descended into violence and corruption, unlike anything humanity had ever seen. In those ancient days, mysterious beings called the Nephilim walked the earth, giants so powerful that their existence became part of legend itself. Genesis records the warning with chilling simplicity. There were giants in the earth in those days. These were not ordinary warriors. Ancient traditions described them as mighty men of renown, figures tied to a world collapsing under wickedness and chaos. According to the scriptures, humanity became so corrupted that violence filled the earth completely. And while civilizations ignored the danger growing around them, one man continued walking faithfully with God. Enoch, a figure so mysterious that the Bible says, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. But before his disappearance, Enoch witnessed signs of judgment approaching the world. Ancient writings connected to his name describe terrifying visions of rebellion, fallen beings, and destruction coming upon the earth before the great flood. If Goliath represented the terror of one giant, the world before Noah faced something far worse, an entire age overshadowed by beings that turned humanity toward fear, corruption, and violence until judgment finally came upon the earth. And according to ancient biblical tradition, Enoch saw it all before it happened. The full story reveals why the ancient world became so dangerous, why the flood became unavoidable, and how the mystery of the Nephilim still echoes through biblical history even after Goliath fell. Because the Valley of Elah was never just about one giant. But the story does not end in the Valley of Elah. It reaches back to the days before the flood, to the Nephilim, Enoch, and the mystery that terrified the ancient world. It leads back to the days before the flood, to the Nephilim, Enoch, and the mystery that terrified the ancient world. Stay with me, because the deeper this story goes, the darker it becomes.